intention is to try to keep this to less than 15 minutes. The second step is I will concentrate a little bit on growing up and things that drove me in the direction that I went with my life. And then talk about what was the heart of my life, which was my naval service. And then wrap it up with a quick comment about what we did in retirement and our association with this church. So let me start in first here. Most of you have seen, whoops, it went away. Okay, let me back this up. Okay, this is a picture you've probably seen in church. It's kind of a teaser to interest people in maybe showing up to listen.
Yeah, some people think it's better without the mic, because you do project really well.
Well, people back in here though.
Oh, okay, all right.
And he can project really well, I know that.
But anyhow, if I get this all right now.
It's all
I intend to kind of do this in 3 parts, like I said. My early life, building up through the Naval Academy, into my Navy career, and then wrapping it up with the wrap up of what I've done after the Navy. Can you hear me all right on this?
Yep.
Okay. This is an indicator of what I did. This is when I was 5 years old, and I was in the pet parade at Findlay, Ohio, my hometown. I'd grown up on a farm, and so a lot of animals, and also dogs and cats, you name it, showed up for the pet parade. But I thought it was really neat. Susie, my pet, was a lamb that had been orphaned. And Dad had brought it in from the field, and we raised it in a box behind the wood stove in the kitchen. And so for a number of weeks, he was there until we found a mother sheep that would accept her and take care of her. But she stayed around. She knew who I was, because after this point in time, we moved the sheep over to an aunt's farm that my father farmed. And every time I go over to visit the farm, for some reason, I walk out to the sheep pasture, she would come over to it. It was interesting. Just that 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of association had attached her to me. The unfortunate thing was that after 3 or 4 years, when I went over to the farm, she was on her back. It was springtime, about time for shearing, and she was loaded with wool. And if a sheep gets down and on its back in particular, it can't get up. And so she'd been there for a while, and was unable to get up and died from that situation. The farm, I'm primarily a dairy farm. We had like 25 cattle, and we bought milk from other farms, and we had a small dairy also. The small dairy was unpasteurized milk, and after you get past the 30, you could get automatic milkers and stuff, and so it improved the ease of milking cows. But anyhow, we then went on to, at a point in time where we finally had to do away with the dairy because the war came along. And so we ended up selling our milk to a large dairy that would buy milk from the various farms for a lot of it. And as we kept the cattle specifically, because we had 2 hired hands who were primarily the workers of the dairy work, we thought after the war they had been called in, they were young men, to serve in the army during World War II. We thought they maybe want to come back and run a dairy, so we kind of kept that in mind in the back of our head. But they chose to do other things, so then we got rid of the cattle because it was getting too hard for Dad's age and Mom's age. My dad was 45 when I was born. So he was a whole generation older than most of my friends' parents. My mom was 42. So, and she'd had polio for just 2 years before that, so I think I was very much a surprise coming along at her age of 42. And so, but they were wonderful parents. I can really say that, because when I got into school, and more like junior high school and high school, where I had chores I would normally do on the farm, I remember my dad telling me, the most important thing you're doing is going to school. And he said, if you have activities at school, not just academic activities at school, your chores will be done by somebody else, primarily him. And so I got into a lot of activities. That includes things. I was pretty heavy in the music program, and so I sang in the high school choir. We put on operettas and did the normal things at a fairly good-sized high school. I went to the city school system, which was an advantage because they provided a lot more alternatives, things like this. Marching band, great times in marching band. Probably helped me in my marching as an Naval Council. But anyhow, and knowing this, you can kind of see that I had that in my background. Well, how did I get it? How did David County get in my mind? My brother was in the Navy at the end of World War II. He'd just gotten in just before the war ended. And he was home for Thanksgiving weekend. And Thanksgiving weekend in those days, the last football game of the season was played, and that was Army-Navy. All the other big colleges had stopped their program, and compared to what they do now, going clear into January and stuff. And so we were listening to the Army-Navy game, and my brother made a comment to me. He said, "You really ought to think about going to the Naval Academy." And some people refer to it as Annapolis, so that might be a little more familiar term for you. And I made my own mind over time. I thought, well, a farm kid getting qualified to go to kind of a prestigious institution like that, a hard school to get through, good academically, but good physical fitness. But it also, while I went to, I ended up parking in my brain, I guess, because my junior year in high school, there was a student a year ahead of me, a senior, who got an appointment to Westport. So I stopped him in the hall one day and said, "How did you get your appointment to Westport?" He said, I wrote my congressman, and he'll advise you what to do from then on. And so I wrote a handwritten letter, longhand, to my congressman, and got back. He gave me the instructions how to start the process. And so he, and we did that by, first I had to take an exam for the appointment. And so we had like 25 guys show up in the basement of a post office to take the civil service exam, which was provided for getting your qualification, how you qualify for the Naval Academy. And I went through that test with them, and I ended up I was surprised by Christmas time, my senior year, I was appointed first alternate for the Naval Academy appointment. Well, I knew that still was maybe going to be a roadblock, because the kid ahead of me had been 2 years ahead of me in high school, and he's finishing his second year of college at this point in time. And so, but the instructions from the Naval Academy were keep moving through the process, take your physical, and take your entrance exam to the Naval Academy. Well, I hadn't even heard of that before. It turned out it was a 2.5-day exam in the basement of another post office. And there was a proctor who handed out the exams, and the group of people doing it ended up, he ended up, I'm trying to remember exactly what the term was, but anyhow, the exam was given, and And on the third day of the exam, 3-day exam, we had a half, 2.5 actually. The proctor said, bring your pen and ink to your testing tomorrow. And I said, why do we need pen and ink tomorrow? He said, well, tomorrow you're going to have your literature and composition test. I skipped senior English. So I said, well, there's another check mark that I wonder what happened. But that night, this is a little bit of a scene story. That night, we were putting on an operetta, and I was in the cast of the operetta at high school. And the senior English teacher is doing my makeup. So I said, I've got a problem. I got a literature and composition test tomorrow for qualifying for the Naval Academy. And I didn't take senior English. She said, well, let me tell you. For literature, you either know it or you don't at this stage of the game. Just go in and do your best that you can. But for composition, I can tell you how to write a composition. So, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that's exactly what I did. I wrote the story 3 times. and lo and behold, I passed the exam to go to the Naval Academy. Still opening. At this point in time, I still had the other guy still ahead of me. I was just first off, and I had to go to Great Lakes for physicals, and I did that. And so I get down to graduation from high school, and I started working for the Coca-Cola company. I had a summer job just to work with the Coca-Cola company. And about the first week after I started my job, the fellow who had the principal appointee called me. I knew who he was, and he called me. He said, I just want to tell you, I'm not going to take the appointment to the Naval Academy. And the reason was, he already had 2 years of college, and he didn't want to give up 2 years of college to start all over again. Because everybody at the Naval Academy during that time frame took all the same courses. It was heavy engineering, a lot of physics, science. The only alternative you had, you could maybe choose a language out of about 5 languages. So anyhow, that kind of got me through the Naval Academy.
Just hit your back there.
Now, Naval Academy. This is actually a picture of me when I was a first-classman or a senior at the Naval Academy. And I was a company commander, so that's why you got 3 stripes. So I was responsible for about maybe 120 midshipmen as company commander. And they tried to give you responsibilities as you go through the academy. And that's kind of the, in the background is the big dormitory. Okay, and also this first last year, one of the treasures was my mother had been quite ill with bronchial asthma, and they'd been going to Florida now for the winter just to get out of the cold. The cold reacted very quickly, and so we ended up, and my dad and mother came up via train to Philadelphia. My brother met him, brought him to the Army-Navy game. And so this happens to be the photo of me leading my company onto the field, march on, they call it, onto the field before the football game. And the very first thing you see clear to the left is me. So anyhow, after the Naval Academy, my first regular duty station was on the USS Lester. It was a brand new destroyer escort, so I kind of fiddled around for about 6 to 8 months before I really got an operational ship, because we were putting it in commission down in Charleston. And And then once we got a commission, we started doing training down in Guantanamo, Cuba for about 6 weeks, which is to get the crew fully trained, get the ship up and running normally. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I did take we were part of a spatial operation in the Mediterranean, escorting amphibs, and as typical, there was a crisis in Lebanon. And we wanted to show our support for the present premier of Lebanon. And so the amphibious ships went over there and landed the Marines, and we were escorting the ships. And then we stayed around because we were concerned about Egypt. Egypt was sponsored by Russia at that time, had Russian airplanes, Russian submarines, Russian ships, etc. So we always were on a patrol line to keep track of any Egyptian ships were in the area. Quite a change from today, because we get along well with Egypt but they never wanted to. I get distracted and start telling sea stories. It's interesting. The Marine landing was landing craft out of the ships, on the beach, that type of thing, typical of what you would expect. But as they went ashore, all these girls in bikinis on surf bodyboards were out in the water, crawling around, waving at the Marines as they went by. There was some danger because we were all told not to go more than 2 blocks inland because the rebels had controlled the backside of Beirut. After that same ship, I went on the first exercise called Unitas 1. Unitas 1 was the trained South American navies with our to work with other ships and to work with submarines. So that cruise was remarkable because I got to go to Brazil, to Uruguay, Montevideo, Mar del Plata, Argentina, back around to La Guaira and Caracas, Colombia, Venezuela, and then down to Cartagena, Colombia. And each time we spent about a week in the area, and we ended up going out to sea for about 3 days of that week, working with those ships and training them in anti-submarine warfare. We had the submarine with us, etc. So, but I enjoyed it because I got to ride all the foreign ship navies. They wanted to make sure somebody could understand the communications. And I spoke a little Spanish. I mean little. I spoke a little Spanish, and I got to be able to ride those ships. So, anyhow, okay, moving along. I try to make this go fast. That's kind of the start of my career. Next thing that happened, I got assigned to a West Coast ship. And so it was at a time when they were not transferring people across country because they run out of transportation money. And I said, hey, I'm a bachelor. I can load everything in the back seat of my car, and all you have to do is pay me gas money to drive across the country. And I got to do that. So I ended up first on the USS Toledo, which I joined in Sasebo, Japan, a short cruise, and then came home. And then that ship was decommissioned, and I walked across the pier to the USS Los Angeles, which is pictured here. Now, the real benefit of the Los Angeles was we were in Long Beach, home quarters in Long Beach, and what happened?
Keep going. Move along, Dave.
All right. She'd also give me, I don't want to take too super long. Anyhow, we were married back in Joliet, Illinois, in our home church. The pastor happened to be the son of the president of Monmouth College, a Presbyterian college in Illinois. And we asked the pastor, would you like to do a service with your father? And so we had the president of Monmouth College, a Presbyterian minister, and his son, the local minister at the family church, and married us in Joliet, Illinois.
You should.
Okay, I'm going to talk about things that have just buildings. I'm not going to talk about. But from the Los Angeles, Dick and I moved to Monterey, California for 1 year because I was going to go back to the Naval Academy and teach the course in operations analysis. They did not have enough people qualified to teach that. And so this was an interim program for about 3 years. Get you 1 year of an operations analysis, then you could kind of go back and teach it. Okay, I did that. After 2 years, I was very, while I was at the Naval Academy as an instructor, I was the officer representative of the Glee Club. And the Glee Club traveled a little bit, mostly within 4 hours of bus ride to the Naval Academy. And I thought they were missing the opportunity on expanding this. So on the second year of the Glee Club, as people send in letters requesting could you possibly come to our area, I'd write an answer and I'd say, well, we'd love to come to your area, but we don't have the money and the time to go to Pittsburgh or Boston, particularly where we designated we wanted to go. And so the Navy said you can't use Navy airplanes to fly. But as I talked to the local officials, they said, we'll take care of living accommodations and transportation. And so we got to go to Pittsburgh, and the midshipmen stayed in homes. Really enjoyed it. And then, I'm getting sick of it.
You're going to miss your ships if you don't get.
Okay. Anyhow, but anyhow, it turned out the Air National Guard flew in airplanes to Baltimore Airport to fly us to military police to Pittsburgh anyhow. But it was on the National Guard's deal rather than the training exercise. And then we sang several places there. And then when we went to Boston, we did the same thing, and they called us an Air National Reserve VR squadron, which is a transport squadron. And they ended up saying, yeah, we'll fly them down up to Boston from the Naval Academy. And here the Navy's flying us anyhow when you said you didn't have any money to fly us from the Naval Academy. Different policy. Makes a difference. Okay, moving on. Matavesic was my first command. I left the Naval Academy and had a grand time. The first time I took her to see women at the Booth Bay Harbor, Maine for the sesquicentennial celebration of Booth Bay Harbor. Well, we were the honored guests along with Senator Muskie. So we provided a marching unit for the 4th of July parade. The Senator and I were in the reviewing booth, which was kind of interesting. I'd never really been associated with Senator before. But anyhow, when he was a nice guy, we had a grand time. And the real benefit to the crew is the Brown family, who owned the lobster restaurant in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, had 4 sons that had served in the Navy. And they invited the whole crew over for free lobster dinner. Supposedly only 1 each, but they went back both nights. But I thought that was an interesting evolution. And then later on, I took this small service force ship, and it was a tanker design, not designed for underway replenishment. But the service force commander directly said, I need to figure out how to do underway replenishments because I'm low on the numbers of boilers to support the fleet. And we need to have you take up a new task. So that's me doing an underway refueling of an amphibious ship somewhere in the Mediterranean. That ship, we went all over the Mediterranean. We did training exercises with foreign navies, the Greek Navy. We did amphibious landings. These are training landings, like on Sardinia and Corsica. I carried a full load of of all tanks of JP4 to Almeria, Spain, where the Marines were testing the Short Airfield Tactical System for operations, the SAT site. And so I got to do a lot of different things in command of the ship. Then my third one on this ship is I got involved with going to Scotland, from Norfolk to Scotland, and then one up above the Arctic Circle near John Lyons, the supporting group of ships were putting in socials. And so I was there for logistics support for those ships, and there are a couple of destroyers up there also that kind of guard the ships, and so I got to prowl around well above the Arctic Circle for a little while. This is summertime, fortunately. Okay, my next assignment was the USS O'Hare. I went from command of a ship to the executive officer of a bigger ship, a destroyer. And in order to get command of a destroyer, somewhere along the line, you have to go through the XO swap. So, but this was interesting business. So this ship I took around the world. I was also the navigator. We sailed from Norfolk through the Panama Canal to Hawaii, went over to Philippines, and then did all of our operations mainly near Vietnam. We were heavily involved in the 1966, 67 period of the earlier parts of Vietnam debacle. Anyhow, it was a grand cruise. We got to stop a lot of places. And it wasn't planned to go around the world. And so I did suggest once to the squadron commander. I said, you know, Vietnam's exactly halfway around the world in Norfolk. Why don't we go home the other way? They looked at it, and so we came home from Vietnam via the Suez Canal, Mediterranean, and right across. And there are a lot of stories and all this stuff. Okay, this is to point out, and from let me back up a step. Forget this picture. I did go to the Bureau of Naval Personnel for assignment from the executive. And I kind of ran what they call the Command Information Center. But this is back in the days when computers were just getting started. I mean, I would land on my desk to solve stacks of paper like this that flush down the computer at the tail end type of stuff. And so I was always trying to upgrade the graphs, upgrade the information that was available, and that was kind of just a desk job. So I had to plow through it, and I had been trained in ops analysis. That's how I happened to get the job. Somebody saw that on my record, and so I had a couple years in Beaufort doing that. From there, though, I went to 6th Fleet staff in Italy. Peggy and a family moved with me to Italy for 2 years, and we were in a little town, kind of a small fishing village of Gaeta. Beautiful harbor, nice old section of town, and we really enjoyed it. The kids started, continued school. They started schooling while we were in Washington, Beaufort, but they continued their schooling in Italy with an American school right there for the kids of the crew members and officers. But this was an example of, we tried to make it fun for the kids. So this, we had a number of times we did things from going up in the mountains in Italy, but we did get clear up into Germany. And this just so happened to be a picture of the 2 kids on the plaza in Venice. And she is holding 2 pigeons. That flew into her hands. And the other guy stands over here. Okay, from Italy, take this now. I get assigned command of the USS Knox, home port in Hawaii. So this is a problem because we're shipping all of our goods to Hawaii. We have to have quarters, Navy quarters. And shipping the car, takes the car 6 months to get there. And the furniture about 6 months. Well, the good news, we left the family in Illinois with babies then. And they went to school in Joliet, Illinois for 6 months. While I'm out in the Western Pacific. I joined the ship in the Philippines, rode it out to the Yankee Station, where the carriers were for the Vietnam War. And then I took command there. The commanding officer left to go off in a helicopter. And so I picked up my command while off of Vietnam. And we primarily, this is primarily an anti-submarine warfare ship. And it, because of that, we got a lot of escort duties for the carrier. We did not have the number of guns and weapon systems that we support the troops ashore that much. So I was primarily following aircraft carriers during this period of time. However, I did have a small flight deck. I had a helo deck. Did not have a helo on board. It was actually a tomb, which is smaller than the deck for bigger helos. And so I ended up being assigned to be a search and rescue ship for the helicopter. But they had a smaller helicopter in those days that could fit onto my deck to be parked there. And so for about 2 weeks we were involved in being near Haiphong in the harbor for Hanoi. And unfortunately, had not one rescue the whole time, and there was not an opportunity for a rescue, which meant very few, and no pilots made it to the water to be picked up or close enough to shore for the helicopter to rescue to go to shore. And then after that, we headed back to Hawaii. Took the ship through overhaul in Hawaii, the major upgrades, got the big deck so I could do the big helicopters. And then got a rubber window on my sonar dome, which had been sealed, which was supposed to improve my sonar detection capability a lot. Okay, now, before I tell you what this is about, from the docks, I got assigned to the National War College in Washington, D.C., a portion there in Washington, D.C. And so I had a year of schooling in mainly international relations, diplomacy, and current affairs, what's going on in the world. Very, very interesting year. But the highlight of the year was a 3-week trip through Africa. We had choices of where we might want to go. I said, being in the Navy, probably the deep darkest Africa was the only chance for me, so I chose to go to Africa. Thoroughly enjoying the trip. But we flew from Tahoe Air Force Base near Madrid in a C-130, which had a container in it that looked, we called it the VIP coffin. It had about 25 seats to be seated in it. Inside of the C-130, it was comfortable living, nice chairs, not knocked up with canvas seats along the side. Through that trip, and I won't spend any time, but you're welcome to ask questions when I'm done. We went from Spain to Morocco, went to Tangiers, Marrakesh, and saw. We were supposed to see the king at his summer residence in Marrakesh, but Europe, for some reason, was out of flavor with the United States at that time. And we kind of always got the second level down. We had an ambassador level person with us, and so we had good entry to the countries. From Tangiers, we flew to Timbuktu. Does anybody know where Timbuktu is? All the Marines should. But anyhow, Timbuktu is in Mali, at the southern edge of the Sahara Desert. Timbuktu is where the first university in Africa was started, because it was at the camel trails from Timbuktu was a commerce trail between the ocean, Mediterranean Sea, and Timbuktu. And so we just spent the day there. We flew in, got briefings. We did visit the university, which actually has about 4 levels underground, because as the sand would blow around and build up, they built another floor on top of it. But we enjoyed that, and the subject of great interest was the Sahel drought region. We were having serious drought in the Sahel drought south of the Sahara. All the men had left town. They were herding the cattle about 300 to 400 miles south to find water. The Niger River flowed through Timbuktu, but I could step across it. That was one of their major thoroughfares for commerce through those countries. Just it was amazing. And then we stayed in Bamako that night, down in the capital, Timbuktu. And from there we went to Liberia, on to Nigeria, and all these were 2 or 3 day visits, meeting the government officials. In Liberia, they just had a coup, and so the colonel who led the coup is now the president of the country. And when we went in the room, he's the only head of state we got to meet while we were there on this trip. We were supposed to meet most of them. And but I was the last person into the conference room where we were going to discuss things with his staff. And he saw me standing in back, but we run out of chairs. And he said, I got an empty seat right beside you, come on up. So I sat beside the colonel, who was the president of the country, during the briefing that time. And then he invited us all over to his house for dinner. So that evening we went to his house for dinner. And then on to Nigeria, on to the Cameroons, on to Kenya. And all these were typical of the visits we had. And then from Kenya, we're going to go to Addis Ababa. And we're flying from to Addis Ababa when they had a coup in what's the name of the country?
Tanzania?
No, not Tanzania.
Ethiopia.
No, it's north of Ethiopia. Well, Ethiopia, you're right, it is Ethiopia. No, you're right. And Haile Selassie, who'd been the king there for decades, had been deposed while we were in the air flying into Addis Ababa. And so they didn't want us to land, and the pilots finally convinced them, hey, I don't have enough fuel to go anywhere else, because this is pretty remote. And so they finally let us land, kept us under guard in a lounge with 3 or 4 guys, making sure we didn't leave the airport. They were always suspicious of what we intended. And finally, they put us all back in the airplane and flew off to Africa. That was my and we flew up the Nile, which was very interesting because everything was brown except for this very bright green strip on one side of the Nile. Very interesting. So we had a couple days free in Athens compared to the other guys who were still wrapping up their trips that were going to join us in Spain. And then we flew back and graduated from the Navy War College after that. After the Navy War College, I told Peggy, I said, plan on 3 or 4 years in Washington, because 1 year here and 2 more years in Washington. I have not had a leave for assignment from Washington. And you can just find it. But she didn't even have all the pictures up yet. They came in and said, you're going to Cleveland, Ohio. I objected strongly. I didn't think Navy officers, seagoing officers ought to be in Cleveland, Ohio. But what it was, I had the command of a recruiting district. And it was during the height of the real difficult recruiting period, during the Vietnam War. And therefore they were just pulling out people from one. They upgraded the recruiting command from a captain at a desk in Bucharest to a 3-star admiral to get anything he wanted. He just went out and pulled people, that he wanted. And I was one of those that got pulled into recruiting. Toughest job I had in the Navy. When I took command at Cleveland, it was 42 out of 42 in the country. I finally got it up to around, after about 6 months, we were starting to float along about 15, 12, 15, something like that. And my boss was happy. He just was raised the recruiting in Cleveland. New boss came along 2 years later and said, "Why are you in 12th place? Why aren't you in first place?" Well, so anyhow, you never can satisfy everybody. So from Cleveland, I went to we moved to San Diego. While I was recruiting, that's why this picture was up there. This was at a recruiting fair where industry and companies were trying to have, and military had recruiting desks at this recruiting fair. And this was the most popular desk in the recruiting fair. And one of my recruiters had a pet python. So he brought it to the recruiting fair. It got more attention than any other desk I think in the room. And when I walked up, he said, "Here, Captain, put this around your shoulder." I kind of hesitated. He said, "Oh, it's eaten this week. You're okay." So anyhow, that was my recruiting picture. So from recruiting, I went to San Diego and I was on Cruiser and Destroyer Group 3 staff for a year, deployed with them for 1 year, and then moved on to my command, the USS William H. Stanton. This is my pride and joy. It was a guided missile cruiser ship, and we did very well. We kind of walked away with a lot of awards. We were considered the most battle efficient ship in the fleet. We were considered the best shooter in the fleet, and we got awards for that, which either one of those was fine. And then, with this, the interesting thing about we did while I was on the way to Stanton, though, was more later news. A lot of you would remember, was the hostage rescue attempt into Iran when Iran took the embassy personnel hostage, and they're like were about 16 months in captivity, all in prison in Iran. Well, it set up this operation to try and free them, and I was the part of the battle group. I was also what was called Alpha Whiskey, the anti-air warfare commander of all the ships, and included the fighter airplanes on the aircraft carrier to defend the battlefields. So I was always out when we went into the Indian Ocean. I was always about 50 to 70 miles, 5 miles north of the main body of the battle towards Iran. And so we ended up going through the operation. The operation came down that night. I was at both the coast of Iran with my fighter planes to distract the radars to get them looking up. The helos went in low, all over the water, all over the land into Iran. These are the helos that were carrying. They were going to be picked up ashore en route to a hiding place they were going to do until they could do the raid in Iran. Unfortunately, a bad sandstorm had come up that night, not predicted. It was a fine, powdery storm, sand, and we had one helicopter land on the way up to the rendezvous point. So they just left the helicopter, got in the follow-on helicopter, stopped to pick them up. Another helicopter was just having real mechanical problems. He turned around to head back to the carrier. he flew right by me, and I had the flight deck, which was not really big enough for him to easily do it, but he couldn't land on my deck. And when I got on the phone with him, he said, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to try to make the carrier, which was another 75 miles behind me, close as fast as I could. He landed on the carrier and never shut down his engines. They died of fuel starvation. That close. And, so anyhow, we had the catastrophe where the helicopter and the C-130 crashed into each other. In the fueling process, nighttime, everything was in the dark. Night vision equipment. The sandstorm was blowing, and they think that the helicopter just got misdirected by somebody getting sand in their eye and probably went like this. And the helicopter flew into the C-130. Okay, that's kind of my fun part of my Navy career. We try to make it fun for the kids too. So in the process of moving cross country primarily, we do things that the kids enjoy. Going through the redwood trees, seeing national parks, Mount Rushmore. This comes into my kind of commander level. I was headed to the Knobs when this picture was taken. This was taken in Joliet. As we came back from Italy, stopped in Joliet, took this picture, then I went on to join the ship. Later on, these same people are another photo. Only this time, the gentleman standing over here is the force striker sitting here in front of next to Peggy. I'm a force striker, so you caught up with me already. Behind Peggy is our daughter, who is a first-class midshipman.
Second class.
Pardon?
Second.
Oh, second class at that point. She's going in. And second class. And so these are all home. And this is Christmas time?
Well,
Yeah, I think it was Christmas time.
it'll be Christmas of '82.
Yeah. And so then the one behind my son here, the tallest one there, Brian, went to University of Colorado, was in our TC scholarship there. And the little one here became an F-14 pilot for the Air
F-50.
F-50. I'm glad that I've been corrected. F-15 pilot and things. So I always, on Veterans Day, I honor Peggy for having 115 years of military service. Now this is just some more of the tours we took. Now this is the happiest day in the ship's life. You'll notice there's a lay on the bow, and that's very common in Hawaii. Well, I'm pulling into San Diego. San Diego kind of picked up on it, and ships were starting to do it in San Diego also. So the wives made this lay, the ship's wives made this lay. We sent it out with the pilot, the harbor pilot, out with the tug to deliver it to the ship as it was coming in the harbor. And then they put it on the bow as they made the approach to the pier. And I know where I'm standing there, but you would never know it. and so that was a happy day. And that's the day my daughter walked on board and said, Peggy and my daughter were the first ones to come up the bow after I got tied up to the pier. And they said, guess what, Dad? I said, what? Our daughter said, I'm going to the Naval Academy. She was a late selectee for going to the Navy. She was an alderman. And she got picked up just a few days before to go to the Naval Academy. And Derek had told her, don't come to the Naval Academy, you won't like it. And it was just a challenge she needed. And my last job, from the ship, I went out to Hawaii for a staff tour, some factory staff, then came back to San Diego for my final tour of the Navy as Chief of Staff for Commander Naval Surface Forces, U.S. Pacific Fleet. Long title, but it just made, we ran all the ships, logistically, maintenance-wise, manning, you name it, accept aircraft carriers and submarines. Okay, that's the end of the slideshow. To wrap up our next 20 years, we settled back into our house here in San Diego. We'd been coming to this church, came back to the church when we moved back from Hawaii. And then when I did go on and spend 10 years working on ship simulators, training people on ship simulators down at the naval station, mainly ship handling, bridge work that you do on a ship related to ships. And then after I finally decided I really was going to retire, hanging on to idle out for 20 years. And we loved it. We loved the Four Seasons. So it's only a mild Four Seasons, except for about 2 or 3 times. And we enjoyed it, but we got to the point, said, maybe we ought to walk off the hill before somebody carries us off. And so anyhow, and we're back here and thoroughly enjoying being back among Almost Age crew.
What did you do exceptional at the Naval Academy to get to be the leader of your class?
Yeah, it was a company, which was about 100. It's just competition. People evaluated it. How do you do academically? How do you do physical fitness skills? How do you do on a number of things? And I didn't think I had particularly anything special. I was in the Glee Club, I was in the choir, I played in the NA-10, the Navy Dance Band. So I was active in music a lot. I loved intramural sports, all my sporting things were intramural. But I've just been working with the midshipmen and working with officers that would observe you. Somehow did not get there. I got the 3 stars.
And were you in the top of your class?
No, I was about a third of the way down my class, which I was very satisfied with. My class, let me don't hold everybody down. I'll be glad to answer questions. But if you need to go, you're not going to insult me. But anyway, that's the. I stood about a third of the way down, which I was very happy about. I have to admit, my first year at the Naval Academy was like I was back in high school. It did not have the challenge that it now does have. And so therefore, I got through the first couple of years pretty easy. Then I had to start working the next couple of years. But I ended up with a third of the way down in the class, which I was very happy with. I had a roommate, I played, he was one of my roommates for 1 year, that ended up, like second class year, he was number 1 in the company. And he was kind of trouble. He just had fun doing everything, he was smart. And what happened to him though was, he kind of got too smart, and he got in trouble when he was in first class and he got some demerits. The number of demerits, probably, I'm saying probably knocked him from number 1 to number 4. So your conduct was part of your nation. Yes?
I have 2 quick questions for you. Did you say what instrument you played in the band?
I played trombone.
Trombone. Bonus, amazing.
I know, I have been having my arm twisted. But I did have a ship's band. The first captain found out I could play the trombone. He said, good, I want a ship's band. Oh boy, an ensign on a ship trying to organize a band was a major. But it turned out to be relatively successful. Finally, all the departments and the division officers cooperated, and when we'd have a practice, the guy could get off watch and come and practice. And it was highlighted by, this is during the Unitas cruise to South America. We would play going alongside other ships. We'd be up there, and one time we were going alongside the aircraft carrier that was with us at this part of the trip. and they had a ship's man. And so I saw him up on the deck, and we were standing on our behind the bridge a little ways, down, looking down there at me. And so anyhow, when we ended up starting to play, the director was looking around. I could see him looking around. Where's that music coming? Finally, he looked down, and he cheered us on. So, and they sent us over an ice cream. Yeah.
I just have an esoteric question for you. When you're in the academy and you get demerits, how do you get rid of the demerits?
You march them all, mostly.
Do you do, when you march, do you have you do the sword drill?
They never had the sword drill for working off the merit, but this was, you would have, on Saturday afternoons, which is normally Liberty time, the group who had gotten to the merit would get together, they march along. You might have 4 hours, you might have 10 hours. Now, 10 hours not at one time, but you had to come back the next Saturday to work, the next Saturday, depending on how many you got. Now, I got through the first 2 years, leave year, it's our third class year without a demerit. And that was great, there were very few people that did that. My second class year, I got demerits because I went from class to an athletic thing, and I had to change uniform. So it was a fast. I would march back from class, we marched to and from classes, march back, run up the room, change into my athletic gear, and put on my white works, which is this, looks like a sailor outfit, except for a little blue trim on the calf, and went down and jumped into formation just in time, not being late. So I'm standing there, and the Marine comes along, he's expecting us to put him on report, pants too short. And I knew they were short, and I could always lower them down on white works, because you could lower them down. But I was so late that I didn't get that done.
I'm thinking you managed to get way more demerits than that living with Peggy. Demerits over the years?
Well, yes. I do have one story I'd like to tell.
I wouldn't invite her up
This is basically when we were in Ohio, and he was in recruiting, which he did tell you was the most difficult job he had, because it was during the Vietnam War, right after, and people were very anti-military. Also, he was trying to get the farm boys off the tractors into the Navy, and so he was a very busy man. He was on the road a lot. He was just all public relations and walking around with a spiffy uniform and so forth. And because he was recruiting, he kept a lot of stuff in the trunk of his car, like stickers and signs and flags and stuff. And one of the favorite stickers was this one. And he had boxfuls of these that you peel off the back and stick them on anything. And he'd given to the kids in the neighborhood. They were all too young to. The kids loved handing them out, and they'd say, put them on your book cover. If your dad will let you, put them on your bumper, or as we said, put them on the garbage cans, stick them on anything. So the garbage men would go down we had a big cul-de-sac, and all the garbage cans had. You do anything when you're recruiting, like the business with the snake, anything that's going to attract attention and bring some attraction. You know, tell them a story about the Navy car.
Oh, okay. I had a car that was assigned to me, and I stole one of the aviators' cars, because it was a Camaro. And it had wings on it, and it said Fly Navy, and all nice dressed up. And remember, this is 1974 to 1977. And so that vintage Corvette. So I was driving around, but also it was in President Nixon era when we had fuel limitations, and we went down to 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. So I had to lecture my recruiters, do not exceed 55-mile-an-hour.
74.
Yeah, 74. And so I'm driving down the road one day, and I see this highway patrolman up in a kind of roadside park. I go by, he comes out, comes along behind me, the lights come on, I pull over. He said, "You're flying a little low, aren't you, today?" Well, I watched I knew I was under 60. I was somewhere close to 55, 50, maybe 57, something like that. I knew I was well under 60. He said, "Hey, let me show you something. I have oversized tires on my car." So he stopped me for doing 63. Anyhow, but nothing happened.
Did he give you a ticket?
No ticket. Said, Then, later on, I had a guy with a gun stop, pull me over or something. He said, "You're going a little fast." And this was the first incident I had with the policeman. And he said, "Okay, just keep it down a little bit." I said, "I know I can do it less than 60. I can say I'm doing 64. And it turned out, the second one explained why I was really doing about 62, 63 when I thought I was doing 55. Good excuse. Okay. I
want to thank Ned so much for all the preparation. He's been working on this for a while for us, and he did get a broken arm as I twisted him up the back to say
Well, ice cream soon.
but we want to do more of this. We'd like to do this 2 or 3 times a year, and Deanna did it for us last year. We're so grateful to Ned this year. So we have our eye on a few of you. But if I don't ask you first, you can always come up to me. I hear my husband tell the stories of, who you should have after those men's breakfasts. So anyway, we have our eye on you folks, and if you want to, please let us know. And again, thank you, Ned. It was wonderful.